So I want to start today by asking you a question, and I want you to really sit with this for just a moment before we move on. Have you ever walked into a room, into a meeting, or into a presentation, a new role, a new relationship, and had that voice in the back of your head that said something like, they're going to figure out I don't really belong here. And it's inside your head. Or maybe it sounded more like, everyone else seems so confident. Why don't I feel that way? Why? Or even simpler, oh my God, I'm a fraud. Have you ever had these questions? If you ever heard that voice, even once, raise your hand. Or even if you're listening alone, or just know this, you are not alone. The voice has visited every high achiever, every leader, every person who has ever dared to grow beyond where they are. Now, here's what most people do when they hear that voice. They fight it. They try to logic their way out of it. They Google how to build confidence, or they read self-help books, or they tell themselves to just believe in themselves. We're fixers. That's what we do. And I'm not going to stand here and tell you that that's wrong, but I am going to tell you this. That approach addresses the symptom. It does not address the source. Because here is what the most conversations about imposter syndrome completely miss. What most high performers are experiencing, what you may be experiencing right now, is not a confidence problem. It's an identity disruption. And there's a massive difference between the two. The confidence problem says, I need to feel better about who I am. And identity disruption says, the version of me that got me here no longer fits where I'm going. That's a huge difference. Think about that for a second. When you are promoted, when you move into a bigger role, when life throws something at you that fundamentally changes who you are, your skills don't disappear. Your experience doesn't vanish. But the identity you built around that old chapter, it starts to feel misaligned, like wearing a suit that used to fit perfectly, but somehow quietly you grew right out of it. And that discomfort you feel, that voice that says, I don't belong here, that isn't weakness, and that is not failure. That is the signal that you are in the middle of becoming someone new. And that's exactly what we're here to talk about today. I created a framework called Stronger, not because I had it all figured out, but because I lived through the moment when I didn't, when everything I thought I knew about myself stopped making sense, when I had every credential, every achievement, every external marker of success, and still felt like I had no idea who I was. Stronger is the roadmap I wish I had. And today I'm going to walk you through every single step because I believe with everything in me that you deserve to come out on the other side of your growth and more of yourself, not less. So let's get into it. Okay, so the Stronger framework, just an overview. Stronger is an acronym. Each letter represents a stage in the process of rebuilding your identity. And it's moving through imposter syndrome, not around it, not above it, but through it. The 8 stages are: S stands for separate from old identity. T is tell yourself the truth. R means reclaim your power. O is own your identity. N is navigate uncertainty. G is grow through discomfort. E is elevate through standards. And R reinforces your identity daily. Now, these are not 8 steps on a checklist. This is not a formula where you tick boxes and come up on the other side transformed. This is a living, breathing process. Some days you'll be on step 6. Some days you'll cycle back up to step 1. But that's not failure. That is growth. Think of Stronger like a spiral staircase, not a straight ladder. You'll pass the same view more than once, but each time you do, you'll be standing higher than the last time that you saw it. So let's start at the beginning. So S is separate. I call this you want to separate from the old identity. You cannot grow into your future if you are gripping your past. A lot of people do. But here's a question I want you to ask yourself, and I need you to be honest with yourself when you answer it. Who were you before the title, before the role, before the achievement that made other people take you serious? Think about that. Now here's the harder question. Who have you been performing as since then? Here's what happened to most high achiever. At some point in your life, you found something that worked, a behavior, a role, a version of yourself that got results, earned respect, produced outcomes. And your brain, because it's a brilliant survival machine, says, that worked. Let's do more of that. Let's be more of that. So you built an identity around it. Maybe it was the hard worker, the person who always had the answers, the one who never showed weakness, or the overachiever, the fixer, the person that everyone, you earned love or validation through performance. And for a season, that identity served you. But here's the truth that nobody talks out loudly enough. That every identity that you go through got you to a certain level will eventually limit you at the next level. Read that again and let it land. The leadership style that made you a star manager, or maybe the very thing holding you back as an executive, the do-it-all-yourself identity that built your earlier career becomes a bottleneck. When you lead teams, the I need to have all the answers identity that built your credibility starts creating a culture of dependence. The identity served you, and now it's a cage. And here's why this feels so much like imposter syndrome. Because when you're in transition, when the old identity no longer fits, but the new one hasn't fully formed yet, you are standing in a gap. And that gap feels like, I don't know who I am, which your brain quickly translates into, I don't belong here. But that feeling isn't evidence of failure. It is evidence of growth. Separation is the conscious choice to stop defending who you were so you can become who you are meant to be. Now, I want to be clear. Separation does not mean abandoning your past. It doesn't mean the old version of you was wrong or bad. It means that you have enough self-awareness to recognize that chapter was beautiful and it's complete. And I'm writing a new one now. And here is the question I want you to sit with after today. What version of me am I still defending, and why am I afraid to let go? T is to tell the truth. You want to make sure that the stories you believe about yourself become the leadership you deliver to the world. And here is the one uncomfortable realities of that human brain. Your brain is not designed to tell you the truth. It's not. It is designed to keep you safe. And sometimes those two things are in direct conflict. When you step into a new challenge, a higher role, a bigger stage, a greater responsibility, your brain goes on high alert. And because it cannot tell you the difference between a real threat and a perceived one, it does what brains do. It starts generating stories. You're not ready for this. Someone's going to find out what you've been winging it. You got lucky. My God, this time you got lucky. Luck won't save you. Look around. Everyone else knows what they're doing. Why don't you? That is the voice inside your head. These stories are not random. They are your brain's best attempt to protect you from embarrassment, rejection, failure, and loss. They are the internal equivalent of a security system, except this one has been calibrated by every fear you've ever had and ever would ever create. And here's the devastating part. When you believe those stories and you lead from them, you make small decisions in big moments. You hold back the idea. You dilute the message. You ask for permission instead of making the call. You hire people slightly less capable than you so the gap doesn't show. You shrink. Leaders who run by false narratives don't just limit themselves. They limit everyone around them. So telling yourself the truth means learning to audit your own internal dialogue. When the story is, God, I'm not ready, the truth might be, I'm learning. I've done hard things before and I can figure this out. When the story is, oh my God, I don't belong here, the truth might be, I'm in a season of transition. Feeling uncertain is not the same as being incapable. When the story is, everyone else has figured out, the truth might be, everyone in the room is managing their own version of the conversation in their head. And here's the practice I want to give you. And I call it, is it true? Pause. The next time you hear a narrative that feels like it's about your adequacy, your worth, your belonging, stop and ask yourself these three questions. Is this the fact, or is this a feeling being presented as a fact? 2, if most trusted mentors heard my story, would they agree with it? And what would I say to someone I deeply respect if they came to me with this belief? Truth is not brutal. It's not harsh. It is grounded. clear, and compassionate. It gives you the foundation that confidence cannot give you alone. Because here's the thing, confidence can fluctuate based on outcomes. Truth is stable regardless of outcomes. Build your leadership on truth, not on confidence, and watch what changes. Power is to reclaim power, and ownership is not arrogance. It's responsibility in its highest form. And I want to talk about power for a moment because I think we all have fundamentally confused relationship with it. In most professional cultures, we're taught to be humble, to not take up too much space, to defer, to wait our turn. And there's a wisdom in those values. Generally, humility is a mark of great leadership, but there's a version of false humility that doesn't serve you or anyone around you. And it sounds like this. It wasn't really me. We did have a team. Oh, I just got lucky. I don't want to seem arrogant. I'll wait until I feel more confident before I speak up. That isn't humility. That is the subtle social acceptance way of giving away your power. Power, real power, true power, is not about control over others. It's about ownership of yourself. It's about the ability to look at any situation, good, bad, or unfair, and ask, was it my role in this, or what do I choose to do from here? Reclaiming your power means moving from this is happening to me to this is happening and I'm choosing how I respond. And here's where imposter syndrome enters the conversation. Imposter syndrome is fundamentally a state of powerlessness. It is the experience of waiting for permission, waiting for certainty, waiting for someone else to confirm that you are who you know yourself to be, waiting to feel ready before you act. And the problem with waiting is that it reinforces the belief that readiness comes from the outside of you, and it doesn't. Think about the moments in your life when you have showed up powerfully, when you've made a hard decision with incomplete information, when you had difficult conversations that changed something, when you stood in uncertainty and led anyway. That power was yours. It did not come from perfect conditions. It came from you choosing to act, choosing to show up, choosing to own the moment. Reclaiming your power is practicing that choice deliberately and consistently. One exercise I give to every leader I work with from one full week eliminates the phrase I have to from your vocabulary. Not because obligations aren't real, they are. We're all in corporate America, but every time you say I have to, you are reminding your brain that you are in a passive position, that something is happening to you and you are reacting. Replace I have to with I get to. And if that feels dishonest, I'm choosing to. I get to lead this team. I'm choosing to have this hard conversation. I'm choosing to show up even though I feel uncertain. These words you speak to yourself become the frame through which you experience your life. Change the words and watch the experience begin to shift. Power's not taken. Power's owned and then activated. O is to own your identity. People don't follow perfection. They follow people who know who they are. This is a pivot of the entire framework. This is where everything we've talked about, the separation, the truth-telling, the power, begins to crystallize into something real. Because owning your identity means making a declaration, not to the world, but to yourself. I decide who I am. Not my past, not my failures, not the opinions of others, not my fear, me. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. That sounds great. Sounds like a motivational poster, and I get that. So let me get specific about what identity ownership actually looks like in practice. Most people define themselves through three things: the role, the results, or the reputation. I'm the VP of sales. I'm the CEO. I hit the numbers. People respect me. You hear it in your culture. There are people who define themselves by that definition. But here's the problem with that kind of identity. All three things can be taken from you. The role changes, the numbers miss, the reputation gets complicated. And if your identity is built on those foundations, then every challenge is not just a professional setback. It's an existential one because it threatens not just what you do, but who you are. Identity ownership means going deeper than the role and the results. It means anchoring to your values, to principles, to the kind of leader and human being that you are, regardless of the circumstances you are. And let me ask you something. What are 3 words that describe who you are as a leader? Not what you've achieved, but who you are. If you can answer that question clearly and confident, you have a foundation that no imposter syndrome can fully shake. Because even when you are uncertain of the outcome, you are certain of yourself. And this is exactly what the people around you need from you. They don't need you to be perfect. They need you to have all of the answers. They need you to be consistent. They need you to know that when they look at you, they're going to see the same person and not a different version depending upon the pressure in the room. Consistency is the currency of trust, and trust is built on identity, not performance. And here's how you begin. You write down your answers to these 3 questions. What do I believe about people and about leadership? What is your belief? And what do I stand for, even when it's costly? And what do I want to be known for? Not at the peak of my career, but at the end of my life. I used to have some of the students write a eulogy after they die and to describe who they are. And the reality is, it takes a long time for you to anchor and to understand what it is you stand for. So my questions to you is, what do you stand for? And what are the values that you're bringing to the equation? Those answers are not your job description. They're your identity. And when you can act from the place consistently, even imperfectly, you build something that neither success nor failure can take from you. Shape shifting to fit the room is exhausting. Owning who you are is liberating. So the end is navigate uncertainty. Uncertainty is not the absence of readiness. It's the required path of growth. And here's the truth that took me a long time to fully accept. The feeling of uncertainty does not mean you are on the wrong path. It means you are on a new one. We live in a culture that treats certainty as the precondition for action. Get clear first, then move. Know exactly where you are going before you start walking. Wait until you feel ready. And on the surface, that sounds very wise, sounds great. But what actually happens when we apply logic to growth? We wait, we plan, we prepare, we research, we wait some more. And that gap between where you are and where you want to be quietly grows wider because certainty never quite arrives. And here's what I've learned from working with leaders across every industry. Certainty is not a feeling you get before you act. You have to take action first. It is a feeling you build by acting. Think about learning to ride a bike. Nobody achieved balance by thinking really hard about balance. You got on, you wobbled, you corrected, you fell, you got back on, and somewhere in that messy, uncomfortable process, certainty arrives. Not because the road got smoother, but because you are more capable. Navigating uncertainty is the same process. The most dangerous thing about imposter syndrome is that it uses uncertainty as proof of unworthiness. See, you're not sure. That means you don't belong here. But that logic is fundamentally flawed. Uncertainty is not evidence that you're incapable. Uncertainty is the evidence that the territory is unfamiliar, and those are 2 completely different things. The fish doesn't struggle to swim in familiar waters, but put that fish in new river or it will, something where it needs to adjust. That's not weakness, that's wisdom. It's awareness. It's the beginning of mastery. And here's what navigating uncertainty actually requires. First, you have to distinguish between productive discomfort and destructive discomfort. Productive discomfort is the stretch, the new skill, the unfamiliar context, the growth edge. Destructive discomfort is misalignment. Doing work that fundamentally conflicts with your values. One deserves to be leaned into. One deserves to be examined. Second is to take that smallest possible action that moves you forward. You don't have to have the whole plan. You just have to have the next step. What is the one thing you can do today from right where you are that moves you towards where you want to go? It's that simple. Third, you want to debrief yourself after, not before. Most people try to analyze whether they're ready before they act. Flip it, act first. Then ask why what you've learned. The data from real action is always richer than the data from speculation. If you took action and you tried and then you evaluated afterwards, you're going to understand. Confidence doesn't come before action. Confidence is a byproduct of action, especially imperfect action taken in the face of uncertainty. G stands for growth through discomfort. If it feels easy, ask yourself honestly, is this growth or just familiarity? I want to say something that sounds simple but has profound implications. Growth is discomfort. Not growth causes discomfort. Growth is discomfort. They are the same thing. Your muscles only grow when they experience resistance. Your lungs only expand when they are pushed. Your mind only stretches when it encounters what it does not know yet. And yet, when we have somehow convinced ourselves that discomfort is a signal that something is going wrong, that if it is hard, maybe we're not cut for it, that is where we really meant to be here. It wouldn't feel this difficult. The logic is backwards, and it's keeping a lot of incredibly capable people playing far smaller than what they were made for. And here is the reframe I want to offer you. The next time you feel the discomfort and growth, the tightness in your chest before a big presentation, the vulnerability of sharing an idea that might be rejected, the exhaustion of holding a standard that requires more of you than what's comfortable, instead of asking, why is this so hard? What is this discomfort teaching me? What is in it? What is it producing in me? Who am I becoming in the middle of this? Because growth doesn't happen in the highlight reel. It happens in the hard, quiet, unglamorous middle. The part nobody posts about, the part where you're not sure it's working yet. The part where the only thing keeping you going is the decision you made to not quit. Leaders who avoid discomfort don't just limit their own growth. They signal to people around them that discomfort is something to be avoided rather than embraced. That builds cultures that play it safe. That choice, comfort over innovation, that punishes failure rather than learning from it. Leaders who embrace discomfort, they build cultures of courage. The size of your discomfort tolerance is directly proportional to the size of the impact that you can create. E stands for elevate your standards. Your life is not built on your goals. It's built on what you refuse to tolerate. This phrase that changes the way I think about success. You do not need to rise to the level of your goals. You fall into the level of your systems and your standards. Most people who struggle with imposter syndrome are also struggling with a quiet erosion of personal standards. And it happens gradually, slowly. You begin to tolerate that inner voice that says you're not enough. Slowly, you become accepting less for yourself in the moments that matter. Slowly, the gap between who you say you are and how you actually behave begins to widen. And here is the gap. The gap produces shame, not because you're a bad person, but because somewhere deep inside of you, you know that you are not operating at the level you're capable of. And that knowing, unaddressed, feeds imposter syndrome. You want to elevate your standards. It's not about being harder on yourself. It's about closing the gap between your values and your behavior. Start with this question. What am I currently tolerating that is no longer in alignment with the leader I'm becoming? These are very hard questions. Maybe it's tolerating negativity in your self-talk. Maybe it's tolerating mediocrity in a team dynamic that you've been, that you have the authority to change. Maybe it's tolerating a habit that slowly drains your energy, your focus, or your confidence. Identify one thing, not 10 things. Don't go into a strategic plan. One thing, and then raise that standard on that one thing for 30 days. Let that become the new floor. Excellence is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about refusing to let your lowest moments define your standards. R is for reinforce identity. You don't build identity through insight. You build it through repetition. We reach the final letter, and in many ways, it is probably the most important. because all of the insight in the world is worthless if it doesn't translate into consistent action. Identity is not built on a single moment of revelation. Identity is built on repeated, ordinary, unspectacular choices you make every single day. Every time that you tell yourself the truth when the lie is easier, you reinforce your identity. Every time you reclaim your power when the victim narrative is available, you reinforce your identity. Every time you lean into discomfort when comfort is right there, you reinforce your identity. Every time you show up as a leader, you are becoming. Even when you don't feel like it, you reinforce your identity. James Clear wrote that every action you take is a vote for the kind of person you want to become. The goal is not to cast a perfect vote every single time. The goal is to win the majority. So let me give you a daily practice at the end of every day, not the end of your career, not at the end of the year, but tonight. You want to ask yourself just this one question. Did I show up today as a leader? Not the leader I was, not the leader I want to be someday, the one I am in the process of becoming right now. Did I show up as the leader I am becoming? Some days the answers will be yes. Some days it will be no. Both answers are very valuable. The yes days build momentum, and the no days build self-awareness. Both are essential to the process. And here's the thing about consistency. It is visible. The people around you feel it long before they can articulate it. Trust is built not only through grand gestures, but through the quiet, steady repetition of showing up the same way over and over again. In the big moment and in the small ones. You are ready to be in the middle of your becoming. So let me bring everything all together. We started today by talking about imposter syndrome, but I hope what you've seen is that imposter syndrome is not the real story. The real story is transformation. The real story is how you've grown. You have changed. You have stepped into spaces that your old identity was never designed to hold. And that gap between who you were and who you are becoming, that's uncomfortable, disoriented, a beautiful gap. That is not evidence that you don't belong. That gap is the evidence that you are growing. So let me speak directly to the version of you that came in here today, carrying just a little bit of extra weight. The version that is questioning whether you're enough, the version that is exhausted from trying to perform at a level your inner critic keeps moving higher. I want to tell you something, and I need you to actually hear it. The fact that you feel uncertain does not mean you are unprepared. The fact that you don't have all the answers does not mean you are inadequate. The fact that growth is hard does not mean you're doing it wrong. What it means is that you're in the middle of something real, something significant, something that requires every single thing you've built. And then a little bit more, you will reach whatever you want to reach. And that is exactly where extraordinary leaders are forged. The stronger framework is not a destination. It's a practice. It's daily, ongoing choice to become separate from who you were so you can become who you were meant to be. You want to tell yourself the truth, even when the story is more comfortable. You want to reclaim your power because you and no one else are the author of your response. You want to own your identity, anchor in values that circumstance cannot touch. And you want to navigate uncertainty because the path to mastery runs directly through it. You want to grow through discomfort because that is where the version of you that changes everything is being built. And you want to elevate your standards because who you become is what you will not tolerate. You want to reinforce your identity every single day in the choices that no one sees but you. And I said something at the start of this, and I told you that this wasn't about fixing you. And I mean it, because you are not broken. You are not a fraud. You are not behind. You're in the middle of a transformation, and I celebrate you. And that version of you on the other side of this process, it's stronger than before. And if today's message resonated with you, here is what I want you to do right now. Before you close this out, before you go back to your inbox, before the urgency of the day pulls you into 12 different directions, I want you to write down one letter from Stronger. Just one. The one that spoke to you the most. The one that made you pause. The one that you know, if you are being honest with yourself, is the exact place you need to focus right now. Write it down and then write one action you can take in the next 24 hours. That begins with that work, not a 90-day plan, not a vision board, just one action, and do it tomorrow. Because transformation doesn't start with a grand plan. It starts with a single, honest, courageous choice. You want to make that choice today. Thank you for being here, and thank you for doing all that work. And I'll see you on the other side of Stronger. And if you are an event planner or you'd like to learn more, please go to kelliedandrea.com. I look forward to talking with you.